Okay, let's dive right into this. When you look at pictures of Dubai today, it honestly looks like something pulled straight out of a sci fi movie, doesn't it? And you've got to wonder how a city like that came to exist right in the middle of a desert. Well, today's explainer is going to explore exactly that. Because it's not just a lucky story about striking oil in the sand. Not at all. It's actually the fascinating story of the Maktoum family, and a century-long, ruthless, highly corporate strategy that literally built a $1 trillion empire from the ground up. Think about the sheer scale of this transformation. In the 1800s, Dubai was, frankly, nothing more than a nameless fishing village. Folks were living in mud and palm huts, just surviving on dates and fish in an incredibly harsh, salty environment. Fast forward to today, and we're looking at a $1 trillion global force. We're talking the tallest tower on Earth and man-made islands that you can literally see from space. So to understand how they made that massive leap, you really have to look at the Maktoum family's reign. You can't just look at them as traditional royalty. It's much more accurate to see their history as a series of high-stakes corporate pivots designed to constantly avoid bankruptcy and irrelevance. Section 1. Survival in the Sand. Let's look at how it all started. To really get those origins, we have to rewind to the utterly ruthless reality of the 1800s. Back then, leadership wasn't secured by having a fancy title or a massive organized army. Nope. It was held together by loyalty, fear, and incredibly fragile alliances between the regional tribes. In late 1833, there was a grand wedding feast in the Liwa Oasis. It was supposed to unite the Bani Yas tribe. But instead, swords were drawn and it turned into an absolute bloodbath. This massacre totally shattered the tribe. Within just weeks, two cousins, Obaid and Maktoum, completely refused to submit to the new rulers. They gathered a few hundred loyal followers, packed up, and migrated north to Dubai Creek. And if we skip ahead just a bit to 1894, the Maktoums make their first massive, game-changing corporate innovation. Sheikh Maktoum abolishes all customs duties, completely transforming this quiet little creek into a bustling, tax-free port. But securing that port actually goes back to the 1820 General Maritime Treaty. See, the British Empire was expanding rapidly, and they desperately needed safe passage for their ships heading to India. The Maktoums? They intelligently realized that you absolutely do not pick a fight with the British Navy. So instead of resisting, they submitted to British maritime law. It was a highly calculated, brilliant move. By doing so, they stamped out local piracy and essentially manipulated the British into guaranteeing a peaceful, thriving harbor, which safely invited foreign merchants right to their doorstep. Moving on to Section 2, the pearl boom and bust. So, by the early 1900s, Dubai was relying almost entirely on pearling. And this was incredibly dangerous, grueling labor. Hundreds of boats would set out every single summer. Divers were working from sunrise to sunset, holding their breath for nearly a minute at a time and making dozens of dives a day. And they were doing this using nothing but nose clips and heavy stone weights to drag themselves to the bottom. It brought in immense wealth, sure, but it prompts a really terrifying question. What happens when your only industry collapses overnight? It perfectly highlights the extreme vulnerability of a completely undiversified economy, where your entire survival hinges on one single resource. And this brilliantly illustrates how fragile things were, because the answer to that collapse came all the way from Japan in 1916 with the invention of the cultured pearl. A man named Kokichi Mikamoto figured out how to artificially grow pearls just by placing a tiny bead inside a live oyster. It looked visually identical to the natural ones Dubai's divers were literally risking their lives for, but it was significantly, overwhelmingly cheaper. In just a matter of years, global markets predictably flocked to the cheaper Japanese product, and Dubai's pearl wealth was entirely wiped out. Gone. Now, when an economy collapses like that, political turmoil is basically guaranteed to follow. This massive economic ruin sparked what was called the 1938 Majlis, or Council, reform movement. A group of powerful, frustrated merchants demanded control over taxes and contracts. But things escalated fast. In 1939, right in the middle of Sheikh Rashid's wedding, gunfire erupted. The Majlis leaders were killed, the reformers were totally crushed, and Maktoum rule was preserved entirely by brute force. It's a really stark reminder of the immense political stakes and the kind of violent internal division that extreme economic failure can trigger. Section 3. The free trade gamble. By the late 1950s, Dubai was facing another existential crisis. The Dubai Creek was severely silting up, which threatened total commercial ruin because the large merchant ships simply couldn't enter the port anymore. To fix it, Sheikh Rashid made an incredibly aggressive gamble.
He needed £400,000. That was a staggering sum of money back then, and remember, there was absolutely zero oil revenue at this point. So he borrowed the entire amount from Kuwait. He used it to hire British engineers to dredge the creek. It was a monumental bet-the-house kind of risk, but it paid off instantly. The channel was deepened, the massive ships returned, and Dubai was overnight revived as the busiest port in the region.
And with that port wide open again, merchants found a highly lucrative, if somewhat secretive, way to make absolute fortunes through the 1960s City of Gold route. It was a straightforward three-step process. Step 1. Merchants would legally import gold from financial hubs like London or Switzerland. Step 2. They'd take those gold bars and hide them on small wooden dhows, burying them right under ordinary sacks of dates. Step 3, they secretly offloaded the gold in Bombay to exploit India's strict 1962 gold import ban. It was, for all intents and purposes, a massive smuggling network, but it pumped incredible, undeniable profits straight back into Dubai. Section 4. Oil, Unity, and Expansion. All right, we're moving into the late 60s now, and this is a time of massive geopolitical panic in the region, right as Britain announces its 1968 military withdrawal, which effectively leaves these tiny Gulf states completely unprotected. The local leadership knew they had to act, and fast. Sheikh Rashid partnered up with Abu Dhabi's leader, Sheikh Zayed, and by 1971, they formally united to form the United Arab Emirates. This wasn't about prestige. It was a pure, unadulterated survival strategy. And incredibly, just as all of this geopolitical maneuvering was happening, in 1966, Dubai finally struck its very own offshore oil reserves in the Fateh field. Talk about timing.
So the crucial point here is exactly how they used that newly discovered money. Because by 1969, oil was bringing in about $30 million a year. But Sheikh Rashid didn't just throw it away on vanity projects or palaces. He built permanent corporate systems. He took that windfall and poured it directly into critical infrastructure, things like Port Rashid, which was a massive deepwater harbor, and the 39-story World Trade Center. He treated these projects not as luxuries to show off, but as true economic engines designed from the ground up to ensure long-term self-sufficiency for the entire city.
Which brings us to Section 5, building a global metropolis. Now, eventually, Sheikh Mohammed realized their relatively modest oil reserves were flatlining. He knew they needed a massive pivot fast. Oil was always going to be temporary. Dubai needed to become a permanent, global, tax-free business hub. What followed was an absolutely frantic, debt-fueled infrastructure boom designed to make Dubai a direct rival to places like New York or London. In 1985, they launched the Jebel Ali Free Zone, offering zero taxes and 100% foreign ownership. Then by 1999, the iconic Burj Al Arab completely redefined their luxury image on a global scale. And just a few years later, in 2002, they unveiled the Palm Jumeirah, literally the world's largest artificial island. The strategy was crystal clear and incredibly aggressive. Borrow big, build impossibly fast, and use the sheer scale of the projects to generate massive international wealth. But, as we all know, debt always comes due. Section 6, crash, bailout, and beyond. When Lehman Brothers collapsed in 2008, it completely froze global credit, and Dubai's breakneck expansion came to a terrifying, screeching halt. $26 billion. That is the staggering amount of debt that the state-owned Dubai World announced it simply couldn't repay in 2009. The fallout was apocalyptic. Construction stopped overnight. You had expats literally abandoning their luxury cars at the airport just to flee the country, and the city's entire financial system was teetering right on the edge of total collapse. Then, at the 11th hour, comes a critical lifeline. $10 billion. In December 2009, neighboring Abu Dhabi stepped in and delivered this massive bailout through the UAE Central Bank. It was a completely historic intervention that quite literally saved Dubai's financial system from falling apart into dust. And, that deep geopolitical gratitude is forever written right into the city's architecture. Because when the world's tallest building finally opened just a month later in January 2010, it was abruptly renamed from Burj Dubai to Burj Khalifa. It was quite literally a towering thank you permanently carved into the skyline, directly honoring Abu Dhabi's leader, Sheikh Khalifa, for stepping in when it mattered the absolute most. Which brings us to the ultimate result of this century-long corporate strategy. If you break down Dubai's GDP today, non-oil sectors make up over 99% of it, while the oil sector has shrunk to less than 1%. It is the absolute ultimate proof of the Maktoum's success. They successfully managed the ultimate pivot, going from a fragile, totally vulnerable pearl diving economy to a highly diversified, incredibly resilient megacity. And that leaves us with a final, really compelling question to end our explainer today. How will this city reinvent itself next? Think about it. Dubai has always treated its limits like a blueprint rather than a barrier. They played the long, calculated corporate game, while others around them got caught up in regional politics. It really makes you wonder, with that totally unique mix of strict discipline and crazy, bold risk-taking, what impossible project are they going to conquer tomorrow?